příští stanice náměstí Republiky, přestup na linky S a další vlakové spoje.
On December 31st, 2012, I woke up in my favorite city. Be it was in a cold but brightly lit room, on a mattress, on the floor, next to my best friend and a man named Angel. Don't worry, it's not one of those stories. I don't know if Angel was his real name, or if that was a name he had chosen to go by. But he dressed and acted in a way that was nostalgic for a time he would never live through. Leather vest, no shirt, bell-bottoms, and a guitar strapped over his chest at all times. Long flowing hair and as slim as a green bean. He's the kind of guy you meet when you're traveling. But truly, he did have the face of an angel. I can't remember where in the States he's from, and I also can't remember how he got so far from the States and why he chose here of all places. But here we were together, him, Carla, and I, thousands of miles from our home. We were staying with Don, an American filmmaker from Oklahoma. How he met Angel, I have no idea. But a few weeks prior, I messaged Don on Couchsurfing, and he sent Carla and I his address. On a chilly day in late December, we knocked on their door to stay with them for a week. The serious filmmaker and the carefree musician. For 7 days, Angel told us stories about hitchhiking across America, while Don critiqued vintage German movies over giant beer steins. They were two of the weirdest and most wonderful people I met on my 6-month journey. Together, we all aimlessly wandered through the capital of Eastern Europe, the most beautiful city in the world to me. Prague, the capital of the Czech Republic. The light in Prague is crisp and bright. It halos around the pastel town. Buildings painted in light pink, silky lilacs, pale blues, and creamy yellows. I love the Charles Bridge overflowing with music. You can get the whole view of the city from Petrin Hill. The home of classical music and epic clubbing. Now, this was not my first time here, but Prague was the first place I ever went to outside of my country. I left New York to study abroad for a semester in 2010, and during those 5 months, I fell in love with the city because I was quietly falling in love with new sides of myself. It was the first time I was truly far from home and alone, but not in a lonely sense. I had the freedom to be alone. I could walk through the city at my own pace, go to whatever coffee shop I wanted to before class, and ride any tram I wanted to the end of the line. It was a slice of independence that my 19-year-old self had never experienced before. I had to figure out everything on my own, from directions to health insurance, in a country where I didn't speak the language. Every morning, I felt my heart squeeze with excitement as I wandered through the serpentine cobblestone streets and figured out the city on my time. I love the quiet feeling of walking down the same road that thousands of other people have walked on for thousands of years. I felt an oldness that had never graced my cheeks in the States. I am so grateful that that was my first glimpse of the outside world. So when I was 22, I went back to her. Once I graduated college, I booked a one-way ticket to Paris and hopped around on the other side of the Atlantic. After 6 months of traveling, my friend Carla joined me on Christmas. And a few days before New Year, we arrived in Prague and all of her glory, which is how I ended up sleeping on a mattress on the floor in the heart of the city. During our few chilly days in the city, when we weren't with Angel and Dawn, Carla and I played tag in the courtyard of Prague Castle. We found secret staircases and explored stores filled to the brim with puppets and blown glass. I woke up early every day, trying to catch as much sunlight on the city before the sun left us at 4 in the afternoon. All I wanted to do was walk around the city and cry over how beautiful she is and how good it felt to be back. So on the night of New Year's, on our last night in Prague, we had a traveling orphan celebration. We gathered around their tiny table. We got champagne and cheese and chocolate with whatever money was left in our bank accounts. We cheered for 2012 and talked about whatever it is you talk about when you're in your early 20s and you have no responsibilities yet. Then, when the clock got closer to midnight, we started to rally. We all knew what was to happen next. The party, the countdown, the glitter and performance of it all. And a few streets over was a nearby couchsurfing party where almost every country was represented. It was like the UN was about to rage in a very small apartment. We mingled with others and drank the best and cheapest beer. Then 10 minutes before midnight, the whole party moved out of the house to a large park with an outstanding western view of the city skyline. It was freezing out, but the excitement warmed us up. Carla, Dawn, Angel, and I huddled in the crowd, all gathered like penguins warming an egg. We stared out at the outline of the city, the spires of Old Town, the castle in the distance, the massive bridge connecting both sides of Prague. All the little red homes lit up from the inside. Suddenly, a chorus of languages starts to rise. As we count down, a warmth rises from the ground. And suddenly, I'm no longer in Prague. A memory flashes through my brain as I'm staring out of a crowded apartment on Bastille Day, with a straight shot of the Eiffel Tower, where fireworks are exploding all around it. I blink, and now I'm holding on to the waist of my Russian couchsurfer as he speeds us around on a Vespa on the edge of a Greek island. The scene jumps, and I'm reaching up and raking olives out of a tree in Italy. Then the Netherlands, Croatia, Turkey, and Spain, all of these places I've visited in these last few months, whoosh through my head. I turn mid-scream and see Carla and our new friends jumping up and down in slow motion. The old and the new mixing together and blasting off into a new, unknowable future. I think of all of the places and people I would have never met if I didn't go out and find them. The universe had been surprisingly kind to me for taking such a huge leap. My stomach clenched and I felt like I was going to explode, like one of those fireworks flying over our heads. As I celebrated the earth rotating around the sun and living to see another year, I think of the odds of being here at all. So why not celebrate it? Why not jump up and down in the cold, set off fireworks, and kiss a stranger? Even if we don't know why we're here, why not live it to the fullest? Because who knows if we will be around to see the earth go around the sun one more time. As I jump up and down, holding Carla's hand, I was just happy to be here. When the clock strikes midnight on January 1st, you feel the new year coming and all of the possibilities that lay ahead. And in 1889, 2 women are sailing towards new countries and a new decade that they've never seen before, fueled by the excitement of what is to come. I'm Adrien Behn, and this is Strangers Abroad, a race around the world, based on the true story of Nellie Bly.
Day 48, December 31st.
On the last day of the year, Nellie sits in the social hall of her steamship to celebrate with the officers and fellow passengers. She left Hong Kong on the 26th. Her steamship, the Oceanic, is known to be one of the faster and luxurious steamships, headed towards Yokohama. But Nellie couldn't care less about the amenities. All she cares about is its speed. And luckily for her, only a few months prior, this exact boat made the fastest trip on record from Yokohama to San Francisco. And Nellie prays that the boat's luck will carry over into the new year. When the clock nears midnight, Nellie stands and sings with her new travel friends. By now, she's used to being around people she won't be with for very long. Nellie scans the decadent room. It's filled with dozens of people in their finest clothes, all holding flutes of champagne and chit-chatting to each other, while Nellie is still wearing the same dress she left New York in 40 some odd days ago. She toasts to the strangers and shakes people's hands, wishing them all good luck and a happy new year. We toasted to the death of the old year and the birth of the new one. We shook hands around, each wishing the other happy new year. 1889 was heated, and in 1890, with its pleasures and pains, began. Her fellow New Yorkers are stuck in the past, as she's, in the future, sailing towards another ancient civilization. In between sips of champagne, Nellie contemplates what the next year will actually bring. More stories new adventures, and hopefully a winner to this race. The end is closer than she can believe. Hopefully, she drank enough champagne to forget about the race altogether just for the evening. She cherishes this one random time she gets to ring in the new year on the other side of the world. As she cheers to 1889, she thinks about the nearby future. Nellie is a little annoyed that she has to spend 5 days in Japan. America is just on the other side of the ocean, and she can't wait to sail across it.
Day 50, January 2nd.
On January 2nd, Japan's outline comes into view. Nellie stares at the coast of this lonely island. Forests of pine and bamboo trace the coastline. Mount Fuji's base widens and the top sharpens as the steamship gets closer. When Nellie arrives in Yokohama, she expects she will want to get in and get out, just like all of her other layovers. Once she steps off the gangplank, Nellie takes in her surroundings. But upon first glance of the city, Nellie feels something different, a stronger, energetic pull. She gets in a rickshaw, and the city opens up to her. A mild winter air breezes by her. As she plods along on the rickshaw, Nellie feels like she can breathe here. It's so clean and calm, and not nearly as crowded as New York or Canton. As she rides through the city, she notices the crests embroidered onto every man, woman, and child, stating their status. Her rickshaw takes her to the Grand Hotel, the same one Liz stayed at. And Nellie's in awe of this large building with its long verandas, wide halls, and airy rooms that command an exquisite view of the lakefront. When Nellie arrives in her hotel room, she opens up her window and looks down at the orderly streets around her. But she doesn't want to linger. She doesn't want to stare at a city. She wants to be in the middle of it all. Her urge for exploration begins immediately, and she hits the streets. She walks around with her notepad, scribbling down everything she sees. Nellie's writing becomes more porous and soaks in every detail of her surroundings. She first notices the New Year's decorations lining the streets. January is considered to be the most important month in Japan. The Japanese decorate their homes for the New Year deity, who leaves good luck at their doorsteps for the coming year. They have two very pretty customs in Japan. One is decorating their houses in honor of the New Year, and the other celebrating the blooming of the cherry trees. Bamboo saplings covered with light, airy foliage form an arch, making very effective decorations. Rice trimmings mixed with seaweed, orange, lobster, and ferns are hung over every door to ensure a plentiful year. What is most starkly apparent to her is how quiet the streets are. She observes the locals, who don't seem to walk, but quietly glide around the city with their high wooden shoes and deep sleeves. She listens to the shuffle of their elevated wooden sandals, as if walking on tiny stilts. The locals are raised up a few inches off the ground to prevent their feet from getting wet or muddy. On a cold day, one would imagine that the Japanese were a nation of armless people. They folded their arms up in their long, loose sleeves. A woman's sleeves are to her what a boy's pockets are to him. Her cards, money, combs, hairpins, ornaments, and rice paper are carried in her sleeves. Her rice paper is her handkerchief, and she notes with horror and disgust that after using it, we return our handkerchiefs to our pockets. And like Liz, Nellie is transfixed by how women hold themselves here. The Japanese woman knows nothing whatever of bonnets, and may they never. On rainy days, they tie white scarves over their wonderful hairdressing, but other times they waddle bareheaded with a fan and umbrella. They have no furniture. Their bed is a piece of matting, their pillows narrow blocks of wood. They rest the back of the neck on the velvet-covered top, so their wonderful hair remains dressed for weeks at a time. Their tea and pipe always stand beside them, so they can partake in their comforts, the last thing before sleep and the first thing after. Nellie is charmed by their femininity, which is why Nellie is most excited to meet the geisha girls. That night, she and her fellow travelers organize to see one of the geisha ceremonies. They arrive in a clean and well-kept pagoda. They're welcomed and slip their feet out of their shoes and into slippers, then slip into the sparse room with nothing more than matting on the floor and a screen separating the rooms. The room is silent and pressingly calm. As Nellie sits on the floor, she touches the mat. It's as soft as velvet. It was laughable to see us trying to sit down, and yet more so to see us endeavor to find a posture of ease for our limbs. We were about as graceful as elephants dancing. A smiling woman in a black kimono set several round and square charcoal boxes containing burning charcoal before us. These are the only Japanese stoves. Afterwards, she brought a tray containing a number of long-stemmed pipes. The Japanese women smoked constantly, so afterward she brought a tray containing a number of long-stemmed pipes, a pot of tea, and several small cups. By the time Nellie sits down for this geisha performance, geishas are solidified into Japanese culture. Women studied for years to become geishas and learned how to sing, dance, play instruments, and conduct proper tea ceremonies. Some women came willingly. Others were indentured servants, pressured by their parents. Geishas are hired to escort high-class patrons around to parties and are used especially for their conversation. Perhaps one of the reasons Nellie is so excited to interact with the geisha girls is because geishas are encouraged to be educated, and their intelligence doesn't threaten men. They're not encouraged to be meek and submissive. That is for Japanese men's actual wives. Geishas are the savviest businesswomen Nellie has ever come across, while still being feminine. And Nellie is in awe. Impatiently, I awaited the geisha girls. In, the tiny maidens glided at last, clad in exquisite training and angel-sleeved kimonos. The girls bow gracefully, bending down until their heads touch their knees, then kneeling before us, murmur gently a greeting. Drawing in their breath with a long hissing suction, which is a token of great honor. The musicians sat down on the floor and began an alarming din upon drums and gongs, singing meanwhile through their pretty noses. The geisha girls stand, posed with open fans in their hands above their heads, ready to begin the dance. As the geishas stand perfectly still, Nellie's eyes scan the faces and differences between each and every one of the geisha girls. She notices the variety of hair decorations and how intricately they paint their faces. Geisha girls paint their faces to enhance their features and to be seen better in candlelight. It's also a way to mask their true feelings. Suddenly, the musicians begin chanting and the dance begins. They are very short, with the slenderest of slender waists. Their soft and tender eyes are made blacker by painted lashes and brows. Their midnight hair, stiffened with a gummy wash, is most wonderfully dressed in large coils and ornamented with gold and silver flowers and gilt paper palms. The girlier the girl, the more gay is her hair. Their kimonos of the most exquisite material trail all around them and are loosely held together at the waist. The musicians begin a long chanting, and these luxurious bits of beauty began to dance. With a grace, simply chanting, they twirl their little fans, sway their dainty bodies in 100 different poses, each one more intoxicating than the other, all while looking so shy, with an innocent smile lurking around their lips, dimpling their soft cheeks and their black eyes twinkling with the pleasure of the dance. Nellie gets why men fall in love with them so quickly. When the performance ends, the geisha girls are just as curious about Nellie's outfit and come up to her. After the dance, the geisha girls made friends with me, examining with surprise, delight my dress, my bracelets, my rings, my boots. To them, the most wonderful and extraordinary things. My hair, my gloves, indeed, they missed very little, and they approved of all. They said I was very sweet, and they urged me to come again. And in the custom of my land, the Japanese never kiss. They pressed their soft, pouting lips to mine in parting. As they went their separate ways and go back to the hotel, Nellie sighs. I wish I could talk to them. I have so many questions. As Nellie goes back to her hotel, something overtakes her. It's a feeling that she's been able to hold off everywhere else she's been so far. But for reasons she doesn't understand, Nellie lets go and allows herself to be seduced by Japan. Something happens to Nellie as she starts to fall asleep. The clock that has been ticking in the back of her brain starts to get quiet.
Day 51, January 3rd.
The next morning, Nellie wakes up with a tight feeling in her stomach. Suddenly, there isn't enough time to do everything she wants to do here. So she starts cramming in everything she wants to do. That morning, she goes out and organizes 2 day trips to go to Tokyo tomorrow and visit Kamakura today. So on January 3rd, Nellie and a group of traveling friends take the train south through the rolling, dense forests to Kamakura, the old capital of Japan. They go to see one of the largest Japanese Buddhas. They walk through the wide streets lined with bright orange and red pagodas, sweeping wooden rooftops and the crisp smell of pine in the air, resting at the base of Mount Fuji. Nellie and her traveling friends come upon the great Buddha, Daibitsu, a rusted bronze statue covered in a minty green sheen from years of aging. It was built in 1250 by a famous bronze caster and is 50 feet in height. The Buddha sits in a lotus position to a backdrop of lush mountains. Nellie stares up at this statue from another time, and one of her friends is so impressed by it, he offered 50,000 for the god. And Nellie notices every tiny detail of this wonderful shrine. There's something about the serenity carved into the Buddha's face that made her aware of every inhale and exhale. But not for too long, because she climbs up on the Buddha to get her photo taken. I had my photograph taken sitting on its thumb with two friends. Such a human impulse. We also visited a very pretty temple nearby, saw a famous fan tree and a lotus pond, and spent some time at the most delightful tea house, where two little girls served us with tea and sweets. When they're done for the afternoon, they return to Yokohama, and Nellie heads off to bed. There is something in the air here, because every night, Nellie goes to sleep intoxicated with Japan.
Day 52, January 4th.
The next day, Nellie and her travel friends venture north to Tokyo. When they arrive in Tokyo, Nellie gets swept up with the energy of the city. The city feels massive. It is layered and intricate, and upon walking through these busy streets, she wishes she had all the time to explore every single one of the streets and neighborhoods. And although it's the biggest city in Japan, there's an orderly chaos to it, an organic elegance that Nellie has never experienced walking through any other city. Their main goal is to visit very famous castles, but Nellie is much more fascinated in how the people of Japan's most modern city carry themselves. She notices that the Tokyo locals have embraced modernization the most. There is a streetcar line in Tokyo, a novelty in the East, and carriages of all descriptions. This city is busy but doesn't sacrifice comfort. Some men bike around in their traditional clothing, while others walk about in European dress. They choose what to wear based on what pleases them in the moment. And Nellie notes that kimonos are so comfortable that even Europeans wear them exclusively for inside attire. The Japanese are very progressive people. They cling to their religion and their modes of life, which in many ways are superior to ours. But they readily adopt any trade or habit that is an improvement upon their own. Nellie has such a reverence and respect for them. She admires how efficient they are, from their schooling to their chopsticks and even their note-taking. A Japanese reporter from Tokyo came to interview me, his newspaper having translated and published the story of my visit to Jules Verne. She noticed during the interview that he had all of his questions spaced out on a long roll of foolscap, and he would fill in the blank spaces as she answered. She thought it was curious, if not kind of ridiculous at first. Then she watched him take notes as she answered his questions, and after the interview is completed, she is impressed with the efficiency. I concluded it would be very humane for us to adopt the Japanese system of interviewing. As Nellie heads back to the train station, she pauses at the Shibuya station crossing and watches all of the locals gracefully scurry through the streets and crosswalks. She could stand in this one spot for hours and be happily entertained. She takes one last glance and then turns her back and returns to Yokohama. Nellie hasn't heard the clock ticking in the back of her brain once. Time comes to a screeching halt. It has no value here.
Day 54, January 6th.
On her second to last day in Yokohama, she soaks up as much of Japanese culture as she can. I ate rice and eel. I visited the curio shops, one of which is built in imitation of a Japanese house, and was charmed with the exquisite art I saw there. In short, I found nothing but what delighted the finer senses while in Japan. Here, Nellie forgets about the race. She forgets about keeping time, her editors back home in New York, or the idea that another woman is racing her. For the first time, on the other side of the world, Nellie doesn't want to skim the surface. Nellie's need for action melts, and she loves nothing more than watching the locals go about their day. The prettiest sight in Japan, I think, is the native streets in the afternoon. Men, women, and children turn out to play shuttlecock and fly kites. Can you imagine what an enchanting sight it is to see pretty women with cherry lips, black bright eyes, ornamented glistening hair, exquisite graceful gowns, tidy white stockinged feet thrust into wooden sandals, happily playing shuttlecock in the streets of Yokohama. Some women play shuttlecock with babies almost as large as themselves, tied on their backs with an abandon that is terrifying, until one grows confident of the fact that they move with as much agility as they could if their little backs were freed from nursemaid burdens. It is here, for the first time, where Nellie wishes she was born here. If I loved and married, I would say to my mate, "Come, I know where Eden is," and desert the land of my birth for Japan, the land of love, beauty, poetry, cleanliness. For the first time, Nellie feels herself wanting to linger here. And she doesn't want a second to pass her by. At her 10th stop, Japan is the one that doesn't let her get away so easily. For the first time during this whole trip, Nellie wants all the time in the world, right as it is too late.
Day 55, January 7th.
On her last day in Japan, Nellie hikes up 100 steps to see a famous tea house where a Japanese belle lives. This illustrious woman is a muse for poets and artists and admired by tourists. Nellie walks into a brightly lit room. The light streams through thin bamboo blinds that filter the sun, giving the room a pale yellow aura. Japanese Belle waves a hand over to Nellie to take a seat in the corner near a window that overlooks the city. Nellie clasps her hands and smiles at the woman and sits down. On the ground, Nellie touches the velvety mat, similar to the one in the geisha house. And there is such an immediate calm about this room that it lowers Nellie's blood pressure. The Japanese belle shuffles over and brings a small tray of a teapot and a cup and places it in front of Nellie. The woman takes the teapot and pours the tea into the cup. Nellie watches as the stream of water pours from one vessel to another, and it reminds her of the waterfall she saw in Penang. Then the woman places the cup down and walks away. Nellie picks up the cup and takes a sip of the fragrant tea and looks out over the city. For a second, she's no longer in Japan, but her mind zooms back to China, then London and leaving New York, just under 2 months ago. She pauses. For once, she doesn't think about rushing into the future, and instead, she mulls over all that she's been through already. More than most would ever go through in her lifetime. What a wild ride it has been. Race or no race, she really got to see the world. And now, as she gets closer to the finish line, she doesn't want it to end. Because when she gets back on that boat, she is going home. And that thought quiets all of the others around her as she feels the stillness of this tea room. She puts down her cup of tea and looks up. Nellie has a view of the whole city, the thatched houses, Mount Fuji, and the ever-expanding Pacific. As Nellie sips her tea and relishes in her last hours on this one-of-a-kind island. The quietness of the tea room brings her back to the tense silence in the courtroom where she defended her mom all those years ago. Nearly a decade has passed, and here she is, sitting in a quiet tea room in Japan. And she really sees how far she has come by her own will, fortitude, and tenaciousness. She would have never sat here if she listened to all of those editors who told her that a newsroom is no place for a woman. She would have never walked the streets of Hong Kong, slinked through the Suez Canal, or met Jules Verne's in the French countryside if she had taken their declines to heart. She did not need a man of any kind to get her to the other side of the world, or anywhere else she will ever want to go. All she has to do is listen to her voice and hold on to the spark that burns within her. She sips her tea, takes another breath, and looks out at this painting of a view. Then she settles up with her tea lady and bids her farewell.
Nellie Bly is steaming over the Pacific, bound for Frisco.
As Nellie gets ready to leave Japan, her departure is written up. Thousands of people clip out the update and pin it to their walls, stuff it into their notebooks, and calculate her arrival time. With every mention of Nellie Bly, the World Office receives a flutter of coupons. Everyone in America hones in on her little blue dot beeping off the edge of the vast Pacific.
Day 56, January 8th.
After 5 full days in Japan, Nellie wakes up on her departure day, and the clock starts back up. She exits the hotel, takes a rickshaw to the harbor. Nellie thinks about the record-breaking speed her ship had in November and needs all the luck they can get because the trade winds will push against their eastbound ship this time of year. The ship's captain was in on the race as well, believed that they could match their previous record and get into San Francisco by January 20th, 2 days ahead of schedule. He was so confident, he ordered someone to write a rhyming couplet and posted it on the ship's engines and throughout the engine room.
For Nellie Bly will win or die, January 20th, 1890.
Nellie Bly walks up to the harbor. It was a bright, sunny morning when I left Yokohama. A number of new friends escorted me to the Oceanic. Nellie arrives up on deck, leans over the railing like she has on every other boat she used to get here. She looks out one last time at the volcano. The memories of tea houses, Buddhas, and geishas dance in her head. As the boat pulls out, she takes in one last yearning look at Japan. And Nellie isn't sad. She smiles. A rush zips through her body. She knows that a place like this exists. And she got to be there for 120 hours. After rushing around the world, all of it hits her. Going around the world is more than a pitch. It's more than a good headline. It's more than an article. Nellie learns that when you go around the world, there is a story that is untellable, that will live inside of her for the rest of her life. A story that will never fit into a neat headline and a 1,000-word limit. There are experiences that are difficult to translate. Language has huge limitations when it comes to explaining what we have seen about the world and ourselves. This whole time, Nellie has been racing. But here in Japan, she's actually traveling. And that feeling is much deeper than she can stomach. Maybe she's rushed this whole time so she doesn't let herself get attached. Somehow, Japan pushed on the right pressure point and cracked her open. The steamship pulls out to leave the East for good, and Nellie Bly starts to head home. When we hoisted anchor, the steam launches blew loud blasts upon their whistles in farewell to me. A band from Omaha played Home Sweet Home, Hail Columbia, and the girl I left behind me in my honor. I waved my handkerchief so long after they were out of sight that my arms were sore for days. My feverish eagerness to be off again on my race around the world was strongly mingled with regret at leaving such charming friends and such a lovely lady. She knows she has the strength and the skill to return whenever she wants. So with the wind in their sails, they take off from this bewitching island, and everyone hopes for a quick voyage. If it goes well, they will be on American soil on January 7th. After covering nearly 18,000 miles, The longest stretch of her journey is still ahead of her. There are 8,000 miles of water between Nellie and her homeland, and then another 4,000 miles to New York. Nellie twists her ring, closes her eyes, and whispers to the fates for good luck. Her heart squeezes, not only for Japan, but because she knows that this whole adventure is quickly coming to a close. Going around the world in 80 days suddenly feels much faster than she could have guessed when she left New York Harbor. On January 8th, Japan is to their backs, and the race is on again. A Race Around the World was written, produced, researched, narrated, scripted, edited, re-edited, edited again, soundscaped, scored, mixed, and mastered by me, Adrien Behn. Sam Dingman was our editorial consultant and emotional support. Newspaperman and the captain were played by Sam Dingman. Father Time was played by Jake Dingman. Resources include 80 Days by Matthew Goodman, Around the World in 72 Days and Other Writings by Nellie Bly. And for more resources, go to our website, strangersabroadpodcast.com. Please go to Apple Podcasts to rate, review, and subscribe to A Race Around the World. If you leave a review, I will read it at the end of the credits, like... Women Who Travel give it 5 stars, say it's an inspiration for women, and that these women should be on a female Mount Rushmore. What brave ladies! What great storytelling. Oh, thank you so much. And if you're interested in all of the bonus content, anecdotes, and historical facts that didn't get into the show, head over to our TikTok at Strangers Abroad Podcast. If you would like to email us, please send over a lovely message to strangersabroadpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening, and come back next week for the next leg in the adventure of Nellie Bly and Elizabeth Bisland. Safe travels to everyone listening.